Good afternoon and welcome to a slightly delayed Hibs Observer post-match debrief with myself, Liam Bryce and Patrick McPartlin. Apologies if you joined us last night, folks. We had a wee bit of a false start. Anybody who tuned in will know what we're talking about. Anybody who missed it, you can just mind your own business, frankly. A slight bit of bother last night, but it's all good. We're back now. To review Ross County nil, Hibs nil. Patrick, you were there in Dingwall for us. Have you recovered from it?
Just about, just about. I think not quite as cold as it. I think you talk about the Wednesday night midweek game at Ross County, and you always think cold, snow, miserable,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't too bad. So on a night where there wasn't an awful lot of joy going Hibs way, I think we can. I think we'll try and take whatever positives we can. And
Absolutely.
it could have been worse, could have been colder. It is what it is, but obviously the more kind of serious aspect, I suppose, is that it sort of extends Hibs' run without a victory. And although there was a sort of much needed clean sheet, a rare clean sheet in the league, sort of similar failings, I think, and sort of similar themes in how Hibs didn't manage to leave with anything other than a point.
Yep. Yep. Before we get into the finer details, folks, just before I forget, a wee word for our sponsor. Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even Oasis tickets. So get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com and enter for your chance to spread the good vibes. So I mean, let's maybe start from take a couple of positives from last night. Hibs are off the bottom of the league, and defence looked not too bad. Another good game from Marvin Hickpotato. Can you think of any others?
I think the obvious one is the defence and the clean sheet, not just for the defenders, for Joe Bursick as well, because
Yeah, good
they
security.
have exactly, and they have, I would say, rightly been under fire in recent weeks for obvious reasons. I think when you look at the size of the Ross County team compared to the Hibs team, a lot bigger, in terms of like height, and you could see quite early on that it was going to be one of those where Don Cowie and his coaching staff had obviously had a look at Hibs and thought long throws, cause a bit of chaos in the box, and see what happens. Which, given previous games for Hibs this season, is not the worst game plan to have. And there was a sort of sustained period in the first half where they were sort of shelling balls into the box, either through crosses, through free kicks, from long throws. And I thought, for the most part, Hibs did sort of stand up well to it. It would have been very easy to kind of, crumble under that sort of pressure. So if we are looking for a positive, I think the biggest one would be that the defense did finally manage to keep a clean sheet at a fairly difficult venue. I know there's so many sort of cliches about places being a tough place to go, but if you look at Ross County's home record, and the fact that I think both Celtic and Aberdeen only just managed to beat them with late goals, it's maybe sort of all the more impressive that Hibs did manage to shut them out, especially given how Hibs have been in recent games with conceding goals late on, and just not looking particularly comfortable at the back. But I mean, you mentioned Bursick saving the first half from Jordan White, which was came at a really important time, and I think probably gave him and the defence a bit of confidence. Before that, he'd also there'd been a sort of a ball over the top that Ronan Hale was running onto, or maybe Noah Chilvers actually, and he came off his line, sort of hesitated a bit, but still managed to get enough on the ball to clear it. And then later in the second half, towards the end, Alex Samuel threw a one-on-one. Bursick comes out, clears the ball, and I mean, Samuel actually ended up having to get treatment because he just kind of collided with Bursick on the edge of the area. And you get the usual half-hearted sort of shouts for a free kick and a card from the home fans, but it was just good goalkeeping. It was one of those where the keeper is entitled to come and get the ball. He gets it cleanly, and then it's just a collision. But I just thought a lot of scrutiny for Bursick, under the microscope, whatever you want to say, just because of the Dundee United game. And I think maybe even I think you can look at the goal that Hart scored in the derby on Sunday, and point plenty of fingers at plenty of people. Um, I think Bursick broadly had a decent game, and did feel a little bit harsh that maybe folk were pointing the finger at him a little bit more than was maybe warranted for, I think, giving away the corner that eventually led to the throw and eventually led to the goal. Um, But I felt it was a good display by him, and you would hope that the defence can kind of take some confidence from the fact that the keeper seems to have come over or come through this rough patch, and the Bursic himself can sort of think that's a good clean sheet, good performance, build on that on Sunday when Dundee United are the visitors to Easter Road, and I ideally sort of try and take Hibs in the right direction. But talking about positives for a long period of time, probably about at least 2 seasons, if not more, Hibs' kind of strength has been what they've had in attack. And you look at on paper who they've got: Mikola Kurevic, you've got Eli Yuan, Junior Hoylett, Martin Boyle, and it just didn't really happen for them last night. I know you wrote about this in your instant analysis. I know David Gray spoke about it as well. Just that lack of quality in the final third, and I think that that's kind of what's letting Hibs down at the moment. And on any other, not any other night, obviously, but I think if they were having a bit more joy in the final third, if there wasn't this maybe like little crisis of confidence, then they could very well have got away with the 3 points last night. And that sort of really seems to be the difference, because they did. I know the XG was what, 0.63, something like that. Not great, but they did have a number of chances, and it just felt. I think you probably saw this as well. Anybody watching would have seen it. Almost panicking a little bit in the final third. Players getting the ball 18, 20 yards out and just shooting or rushing things, or just maybe trying a little bit too hard to make something happen.
Yeah, I think the struggle, the big struggle last night was in creating clear-cut chances. We've got a comment here from Keith Cook who pretty much sums that up. There is a partnership formed between Ekpiteta and Ahora. That's definitely a positive. But for him, he says zero creativity and fluidity in attack. And I think last night it was, I will throw some stats around while I've got them here in front of me. 12 shots on goal from Hibs last night, but only 2 on target. And I think it was 7 of those came from outside the box, which kind of sums up where they were at in terms of creating chances last night, because there was maybe a handful of half chances here and there, but it's just that struggle to create something clear cut, to make that extra pass, that final pass that sort of really kind of opens up the goal or creates an overload in a key area. It just wasn't really sort of landing last night at all. And David Gray spoke about that kind of quite candidly afterwards. He said it was a real lack of quality that let them down. And I think you've touched on a key issue there, in the sense that there's probably a wee bit of lack of confidence throughout the team at the moment in front of goal. You could certainly see that, maybe guys snatching at the odd effort. There was the one where Junior Hoylett went through, and he didn't have a lot on that chance in the first half where he's hit the side netting, but it's maybe the wrong decision to try. They're taking an incredible finish to score from such a tight angle. Kukarevic had one flying over the bar. Eli Yuan had a couple of attempts himself. I think Jordan Abita, but we're just talking about kind of half chances. Really struggling to create anything that you would, certainly in the quality of chances that maybe say Dwight Gale had against Hearts, got real ones where you would expect him to score. So that is probably the main issue coming away from last night. And it's a weird one, because I think in isolation, going up to Dingwall, keeping a clean sheet and getting a point is probably not the worst result in the world, but it's when you're in this moment, this extended moment now that Hibs are in the context of it, where it's now running into just 1 win from 10 games, it just becomes another frustration, and then it kind of heaps even more significance onto Dundee United at the weekend. But just to stick it on last night's game for now, Patrick, did you see, I think it may be enough to suggest that it's possibly this is going to turn soon enough? I think you touched on earlier on that Hibs were getting into decent positions, at least, without converting that into anything sort of really meaningful. Do you take that as encouragement, or do you think there's not kind of much you can take from it?
I know David Gray and the players would say they'd be more concerned if they weren't getting into these opportunities or getting into these situations, creating the opportunities, but you have to take them.
Yeah.
And I think the concerning thing is that, through injuries, suspensions, sort of slight tactical tweaks and things like that, you have sort of seen a heck of a lot of different combinations in different areas of the pitch, well, especially midfield and the sort of final third in attack. And I think that you're obviously going to lack consistency there, and I think we have seen, broadly speaking, for the most part, the defence being settled has had a positive impact. There has been progress. Obviously, at the start of the season, you're thinking, this maybe isn't the best centre half pairing they could have had, but as people are pointing out, as we're seeing, I think O'Hora and Ekpiteta are really kind of building up a good understanding with each other. I think they complement each other well. Ekpiteta's talked about this in press conferences where he said he just kind of leaves Warren to do the sort of fancy stuff with the ball, whereas he's a bit more kind of direct, a bit more route one. And it is a good combination to have. But I think, the biggest problem for me is that because there's been so little in the final third. Because was it 9 goals that they scored? In the league, which is is not great. Martin Boyle's your top scorer, and I just feel, I don't know. You can call it age, you can call it the injuries he's had. I don't really feel that we've seen the best of him yet this season, despite being the leading goal scorer, and that's a concern. Because you're looking to people like him, especially with his seniority in the dressing room, the fact that he's been there, say for the small spell in Saudi Arabia for he's one of the longest serving players in the books. You're kind of looking to him to be making things happen, but I just don't see the rest of the team kind of making the best use of him, if that makes sense. I just think, he's going to have lost some of his pace over the years. Happens to us all. But I think that, time after time last night, like he just put a different ball, put it in behind, get him to run onto it, great. Because then it happened like once or twice, and he did get a bit of a sort of, there was a sort of chance, even if it was just a half chance. It's a sighted goal, you can kind of run at the defence, but there just wasn't really enough of that. And he goes from being sort of a really potent threat, like a really dangerous attacker, to essentially just being someone who, if you can stop the ball going to him, then he's not going to be as influential. On top of that, you've got Ellie Yuan coming back. I actually thought Ellie played well last night. I think we saw flashes in the derby. I think we saw a bit more last night. He's certainly trying to make things happen. He can be so direct, but yeah, there's little bits and pieces here and there because he's still not completely up to speed. But getting the amount of minutes he did last night will have helped with that. And I think I think that's got to be a good thing. But the fact is that Junior Hoylett has been probably your most consistent attacking threat in recent weeks. And this is a player who was kind of signed not to be the main guy in the final third. He's there to sort of help the others. He's there as I don't know what the best way of describing it is, but you're not bringing him in as your main guy, or you shouldn't be. I don't think. Nothing, absolutely, no disrespect to Junior Hoylett at all, because very good player. But you look at the array of attacking talent that Hibs have on paper, playing him as a 10, because that's the only way you can kind of shoehorn him into the team, which then kind of blunts his impact, is just, I think that kind of sums up where we're at. And then, Kurevich as well, holds the ball up well. He's got a good shot on him. And, we know what he can do. But whether it's the style of play, whether it's, as I mentioned before, it's that sort of crisis of confidence, or whether it's just one of those things which is just not happening, like we maybe saw with Dylan Vente for large parts of last season. There's just, you're not sort of thinking, oh, this is where the goals are going to come from. And I think that's, and we've been at a few games now where we've sort of said, oh, maybe this will be the week that Kwon scores from 25 yards. And then you look at the derby, and I think you've got Dwight Gale with 3 chances from inside the 6-yard box. And you just think, well, if you could get a bit more kind of cohesion, a bit more understanding, a bit more consistency in your forwards. And I don't know whether that comes out of formation. I don't know whether it comes to listening to instructions. The Global Energy Stadium, it's always going to be Victoria Park to me, but the Global Energy Stadium last night, you're so close to the dugout, and it was really instructional sort of hearing, David Gray, Liam Craig, Craig Sampson, Eddie May very loudly in the second half, has to be said, sort of like shouting instructions at players. And, they're not always sort of doing what they're telling them to do. And I don't know if that's if they're not understanding it, if they can't hear them. I mean, pretty sure there would have been people in Inverness last night who would have heard Eddie May the way he was shouting at some of the players. But I think it's just really, it's frustrating because, in a situation like that, you can hear the coaching staff telling them what to do and then they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, call me simple, but surely if you listen to what you're being told to do and you do it and it comes off, then, that's kind of,
Yeah. I mean,
it's
surely they would be able
acceptable.
to. I mean, it wasn't exactly a raucous atmosphere in Dingwall last night, was it?
No, it wasn't. And, I don't know. It is a bit of a concern. I don't think we've seen enough. I don't think you can look at it and say, oh well, they're getting into good positions. Oh, they're putting balls into the box. I mean, how many of the crosses that they're putting into the box are actually finding a Hibs player
There was
or
so
beating the
many
first
overhit
first
or
man?
underhit
Exactly.
last night. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's maybe it's working in training. I don't know. Maybe it's, and obviously against a team like Ross County, like we were saying, they're big, especially at the back. You've got the three centre halves, sort of like mop up anything that comes their way. Ross Laidlaw goal isn't the shortest either, but I mean, it's what's they say about the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Like, mix it up a bit, because if you're at the moment, if you're a team and you're playing Hibs, especially if it's on your home ground, I think the easiest thing to do is to just say, well, here you go, take the ball, because you're not going to do anything with it. We'll just sort of sit back and then we'll just mop up anything that goes into the box, because I think we've seen sort of set pieces, crosses, that sort of thing. That seems to be where Hibs are dangerous at the moment. But it doesn't really feel there's a plan B, and I don't think it's for the want of trying. I think Kieran Bowie being injured has been a big miss for Hibs. I think that's been like a really, it's been really sort of like bad luck for David Gray and the rest of the team. Ellie Yuan's only really coming back as well, and it's just that not having like a proper number 10 as well, and just I mean, I do feel for David Gray, because I think he's trying everything to kind of break this run of not winning. It feels like there's incremental progress. Like he's talked about himself, like in the derby after Hibs conceded the equaliser, they go back up the top, and then he's saying it's Craig Gordon that has the save to make afterwards. And you think, well, yeah, true. In previous games, they probably would have just collapsed like a deck of cards. And then last night it's a clean sheet. But I mean, it's as you were saying earlier, it's 10 games in, and I mean, I think I maybe said on Sunday after we were discussing the derby and saying that if Hibs could put it all together, then they would be in the position of being able to give a team like a proper doing, like 4 or 5 goals to 0 to 1. But I don't really see any sign of them being able to put it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the kind of bit that Gray has to work on at the moment. That's the sort of missing puzzle piece at the moment. It's just, how does he make it all connect? And I'm talking a lot here, but I think as well the subs, I get it. Players are maybe not 100%. It's a 3-game week. You've maybe got bumps and bruises from the derby. You're trying to keep people fresh for Sunday, because that's a chance to get the 3 points. But I think we've seen this a couple of times, that subs are made that maybe don't make an awful lot of sense. There's some that you can maybe understand why they've been made, but I just felt last night, for instance, I know he was on, I think he was on a yellow card, but Joe Newell was playing really well. He kind of had a bit between his teeth, driving the team forwards, a lot of talking, a lot of shouting, a lot of encouragement, and then taking him off just really took something out of the midfield. Like, I know he's a divisive figure among the fan base, but last night was kind of, I wouldn't say prime Joe Newell, but it was he was sort of clearly kind of dragged the team forward, trying to make things happen. To get a couple of shots himself, which is usually a sure sign that he's getting a bit angry about something and wants to try and change it. But him going off really kind of upset the balance in the midfield. And nothing against Kwon, who came on, but it's just, sometimes it just feels like certain subs are being made, and it's either, I don't know if it's for security, I don't know if it's Gray thinking let's shore it up a little bit and try and hang on to the point, whether it's players who are tiring, whether it's trying to change things up. I mean, Nicky Cadden coming on last night for Ellie Yuan was, that kind of worked, because I mean, it was only sort of maybe 5-10 minutes, if that, but Cadden did look quite bright. He did have a few balls into the box, a couple of efforts himself, and that's what you want from your subs. But there were other subs, and you just thought, I'm not really 100% sure why that's the sub that's been made. And it can go down to who he's got available in his squad, the fact that he's got a bloated pool of players with a lot of sort of central midfielders in there. Injuries don't help, and sort of obviously having to play players out of position doesn't help either, because you're starting Hoylett, Yuan, and Boyle, and you think, well, ideally you could start two of them and have, for example, Nicky Cadden, and one of the others on the bench, and then you sort of swap them at a certain point, and then it's instead of sort of disrupting everything, it's just continuing. You're sort of picking up where you left off, and you're not sort of completely disconnecting the flow, which is what seemed to happen last night. So I think a lot of lessons for David Gray from that, and I think the sort of real test will be how they respond on Sunday. If they can take the good bits from the derby, the good bits from last night, and kind of put that together to into a more kind of complete performance. But in fairness, we have been saying this for probably about 1.5 seasons now. I just think it's I think it's more a hope rather than a kind of expectation that something like that will happen. And the sort of, by the law of averages, I think it's got to click eventually. But at the same time, when I'm not trying to be a doom monger here, but when Hibs got relegated under Terry Butcher, there was a sort of feeling of, oh, well, they only need one win, or they only need 1 point, and they never got that win, or they never got that point. So, it's a dangerous game to play to kind of assume that everything is going to, click into place at some point.
Yeah. It's a delicate balancing act, really, isn't it, between giving a new manager time, and which he deserves, clearly, but the sort of balancing that against this assumption that it'll click eventually, which I don't think you can really take for granted in this league whatsoever. Andrew McBrady says, we're not a cohesive unit from middle to front. Great example Patrick's given regarding Boyle not being played to his strengths. And I think that's the kind of probably maybe the key issue for me, is that Hibs have got a lot of attacking talent on paper, but I think last night especially was an example of not sort of consistently getting them into positions where they can hurt teams. I think as much as Yuan did look threatening and lively, I think a lot of his good work, his best moments came actually when he moved off that left side, or when he picked up the ball in sort of transition, and maybe Ross County aren't set in their shape and he had a bit of room to move into it. A couple of shots, a couple of good passes after driving inside, which is kind of comes into what Andrew's saying, that it is like in general, it doesn't feel like a cohesive unit at the moment when a team are set back in their shape and the way that they want to defend. Hibs seem to be really kind of short on ideas as to how to move that around, how to break it down, how to create gaps. I think a lot of the time when maybe Yuan was getting the ball out wide, it was, it's in a situation where 2-3 guys are then able to move out and defend that. They're not kind of creating overloads for him where he can get his fullback one-on-one, is what I'm trying to say. There's not seen an awful lot of that, and it's sort of, as much as he's a dangerous player, I think teams will think if the ball goes to Yuan in a situation where we are able to get 2 guys out to him, most teams would back themselves to be able to deal with that. And I think for the most part, Ross County, they did that, and you talked about crosses into the box as well. Again, a team playing 3 big centre halves, they'd probably take that all day. As opposed
Which Hibs could do.
They can. As opposed to trying to break them down with something sort of more incisive, and it sort of speaks to, I think, sort of touched on this in the piece I wrote today, just about the kind of, I'm sort of struggling for a wee bit of identity at the moment. You can't really. I can't really, completely work out whether this is, in the long term, this is going to be a team that plays sort of direct football. And I don't mean, just, even though we saw quite a lot of it in the Edinburgh Derby, I don't mean just a team that shells the ball long. I just mean a team that is, who plays a bit quicker, further forward. We wrote, I think, a few weeks ago that there were sort of signs of that. But then at times, they're still trying to maybe play out and play sort of patiently. So it's kind of, at the moment, I'm sort of struggling to see where David Gray's trying to take it. It's not to say that that won't happen, and there is probably an element of it's something going on that I'm just not quite tuned into. But But I think that, to me, just having a wee bit caught between different styles and playing different ways, as much as we sort of, I think there was a general welcoming of this wanting to be adaptable, which you do need to do. But I think at the moment it's kind of hard to sort of, decipher out a clear style and what Hibs are trying to do at the moment. And I think if you follow maybe the trend that you were you touched on earlier on about the more that this defence has played together, the more generally that guys have looked a bit better. We've talked about the improvement in Marvin Ekpateta. I thought Warren Ahora was very good last night as well. I know there's been mistakes and costly mistakes here and there, but in general, I think they've started to gel together a wee bit, and I think really about now finding that at the top end of the pitch, because David Gray's tried kind of numerous combinations already. It's not quite clicked on a consistent basis yet, as obviously is kind of shown by how few goals Hibs have scored. So it's maybe, I know you've got guys coming back, Nicky Cadden, can he fit in? He's moved Junior Hoylett centrally, as when he had those couple of really promising performances on the left. So do you think it might get to a point where David Gray might have to be ruthless and, not necessarily just try and fit guys in because they are good players and these are the best attacking players on paper? It's maybe about finding what is the right balance for the team rather than just trying to get as many attacking players in that area as possible, because, as you touched on earlier on, Boyle maybe not exactly being played to his strengths. Hoylett, you'd got to imagine he'd probably prefer to play out wide, but then what do you do with Eli Yuan? Do you persist with Martin Boyle because he's turned up decent-ish numbers relative to the rest of the squad, but maybe not involved in games? It's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it?
It is. I think there's a few things at play here. I think one of them is, Gray obviously a little bit feeling the pressure and thinking, we need to get 3 points from somewhere, in the hope that might kickstart, a sort of positive run of results. And, you maybe look at players who have been performing. So you look at Hoylett and say, he's been doing well. You look at Boyle, he's your top goal scorer. You look at Miko, scored on Sunday. Eli Yuan, I think, even though he is coming back from that sort of injury and from not playing, he does feel like one of those players who you play him because there is a chance that he'll do something like in the Edinburgh derby last season at Tynecastle, where 2 goals in 83 seconds, whatever it was. He's a player who can do that. And it could have happened last night. It didn't. Could have. And I think we know that Gray isn't afraid to drop players if they're not maybe reaching the levels that he or they want to. I think we saw that with Josh Campbell. I thought it was interesting last night that he put Kwon on the bench. I understand why he did that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I say I understand why he did it. Obviously, it was to try and accommodate Hoylett, Boyle, and Yuan, and bring Joe Newell back in as your captain. He is. It wasn't a surprise to see him coming back in, and Neto Triantis, I think, has been one of the sort of better performers, very more consistent performers, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of stats speak for themselves. But you're talking about where does Hoylett fit in, where does such and such fit in. It's a problem that sort of plagued previous managers, where they were trying to play a formation and fit the players into it, and ultimately it kind of did for them. And I think sometimes you just have to say, well, who have I got available, and what formations get the best out of them? And it's looking very much like a 4-3-3 or a 4-5-1, whatever you want to call it, where you've got 2 wingers, or you've got 2 wide forwards, and you've got 3 midfielders. It looks like that. That sort of, to me, feels like the way to go. I think they've done that previously, and it's looked fairly successful. But I think it's just, would Boyle benefit from being back on the bench? I'm not sure. He's the kind of player who you want to be on the pitch because he's got that pace. He's got an eye for goal. He's been there, done it, etc., etc. But if there were times that he was sort of really like a peripheral figure last night, and it's obviously about managing players. Nicky Cannon's not going to start. You've not really got somebody else who can play as a 10. I know you've got Rudy, but it's a big ask. He's 18. He's still he's still learning. He's still got improvements to make, and it's unfair to sort of put a lot of pressure on him and say, right, we need you to play as a number 10. We need you to, create this, create that. So I can understand why, he's trying to get players in to the team, however possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is going to come a time where I think he's going to have to make some decisions, and he's going to have to say, look, we're either going to have to change the formation, or players who might normally expect to be starting every week aren't going to be starting every week. And Gray strikes me as the kind of person who isn't afraid to make decisions like that. And you could argue maybe that's part of the problem. There's too many players over the last sort of 2, 3, 4 seasons under the sort of what feels like the conveyor belt of managers that have maybe felt a little bit too comfortable, and maybe having that sort of a bit of a shock is what some of them need. But we could sit here for another hour talking about how to manage players and the different sort of psychological approaches, and some players need the hairdryer, some players need an arm around the shoulder. Different things will work for different players, and that's, as Gray would say himself, that's the sort of thing that he's got to to work on. That's the thing that he's got to find a solution to.
Yep.
At the moment we've got, we do our sort of predicted lineups every week, or for every game, sorry, and it's quite difficult knowing what's going to happen, because every now and then you do get a bit of a curveball, like Ellie Yuan starting the derby, or Kwon being benched last night.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's a case of Gray just sort of thinking, throwing a dart at sort of like a list of names or whatever. I genuinely think he is trying to find the formula that works.
Yeah.
And because he's got an unbalanced team, that's the biggest issue. He's got an unbalanced team. I think or an unbalanced squad. That's sort of proving, the biggest issue. And I think surely by sort of the law of averages, whatever you want to call it, or by process of elimination, you will come across a formula that works, a combination of system and players. And I think that'll make life a bit easier. But I've seen some people saying it's still early in the season. I mean, it's 10 games.
You're nearly through a full kind of.
You are, yeah, and
rotation of fixtures, aren't we?
You are, and I think that you would have wanted Gray to know a bit more about players who can do it. Obviously, that's not taking injuries into account. I get that, but I think it'll be interesting to see what he goes for on Sunday in terms of system, in terms of players, and how you can sort of try and get the best bits out of the good performances. Because this is the thing. You look at the performance at Ibrox. You look at parts of the Dundee United game. Even Jim Goodwin saying even before Dwight Gale's goal, Hibs were the better team. There were periods in the derby where there was sort of sustained pressure, and periods last night. It does feel like there are positive signs there, and it's just it's not being able to do all of them in the one game that really seems to be harming them at the moment.
Yeah.
And like I say, once they can sort of figure out a way to try and make everything click, then that's when I think we might start to see a more complete performance. Because even last night, first half, pretty dire viewing,
mm-hmm.
and then obviously second half they kick things up a bit. You want to see them doing that for 90 minutes. You don't want it to be a kind of rocket at half time and like a bit more urgency, blah blah blah. And I just think that the big sort of question here, the big sort of, I don't know, but I don't know I don't know how to describe it, but basically the onus is on Gray to try and find something that works.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm not sure it feels like it's getting any closer at the moment.
Yeah, but that is the concern, isn't it? I mean, it could click at some point. It may or may not. And obviously, the hope for David Gray is that it does. I think we said before the last Dundee United game that I think the next 5 or so would tell us a lot about this team. But in a way, it feels as if there's still more questions than answers at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, and to stop us being here all night trying to answer them all, we're going to leave it there, folks. Thank you for joining us. If you're tuning in on YouTube and if you can. The best way to support the channel is to help us continue growing the channel is to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It helps get the channel out to as wide an audience as possible. And you also get notifications whenever we go live for videos like this. And obviously it's absolutely free to do so. So we much appreciate that, folks, and we much you tuning in. It's press conference day at HTC tomorrow. We'll bring you quotes from the manager and of a couple of first team player interviews over the weekend. We've also got one coming on to the website tonight. I believe it's Joseph Bursick after last night's game. So do watch out for that. Thank you for joining us, folks. We'll be back over the weekend. If you head into the game on Sunday, we hope you taking a good performance and a result because for Hibs it's overdue at the moment. All the best, folks. We'll catch you again very soon. Cheers.